Senator, good to see you tonight. And so congratulations on your victory.
Thank you,
not exactly unexpected since nobody opposed you, but nonetheless, congrats. And so my question to you is, you say in this letter to the president on his threatened executive action that you will use all procedural means necessary, you say to Harry Reid, to resolve this constitutional crisis the president would create. What does that mean exactly?
We have got to make sure that Congress speaks on this issue. The House has already passed legislation that would bar the president from expending any money to carry out such an amnesty as this executive amnesty, that 80% of the American people in polls show oppose. Yet he's continuing to talk about it. It violates the constitutional structure and law, and it needs to be stopped, and we've got to stand up and do so. And Senator Reid needs to do it as an institutional person to defend the integrity of Congress, who has the sole power to pass laws on immigration, and the president's duty is to enforce those laws. All
right, now it's not clear whether, if we jump to January and you try to pass such a thing once the GOP actually has control of the Senate, whether you could get such a bill passed in the Senate, even under Republican control, because 14 senators voted for a comprehensive immigration bill that the Democrats wanted to put through. So the GOP in the Senate is not uniform on this issue. However, you're going to head up the Budget Committee, correct? And so what powers will you have to shut it down?
Well, look, the people who supported the Gang of Eight bill, Senator McCain and others, have condemned roundly the president's executive amnesty proposal. He said it cannot, he pleaded with the president not to do it, and others that have said the same thing. So we're in a position, first, I believe, that we should, in funding the government when the House sends their bill over to appropriate money to carry on the government for a continuing resolution, that it should bar any expenditure of money to carry out such an executive amnesty.
Can I jump in and just ask you about that? Because here's my question. How would that work? Because the White House won't say what it's going to do. I mean, in your defense, he's just saying, I'm going to do something. He's going to do something if you don't do something. But they're suggesting that this might be an expansion. He deferred prosecution of children who were brought here by their parents illegally. And the suggestion is he might then expand that to defer prosecution of all those children's parents, or perhaps beyond that. But they're talking any place between 1 and 5 million illegal immigrants who might be affected, who might have their prosecutions deferred. How do you shut down funding for a deferred prosecution?
Well, it's real easy. At least the way they did this DACA thing, they gave those individuals ID cards with the words work authorization on it, and gave them a power to take a job, which is improper and contrary to what the laws of the United States are. And so now the president is saying he's going to do up to 5 to 6 million more. And so Congress simply has to bar the expenditure of any money to carry out such a scheme, because it will be a very expensive scheme. And we do that all the time. For example, Guantanamo would have been closed a long time ago, except Congress barred the president from spending any money to close Guantanamo. That's what he wanted to do. Hundreds, thousands of legislative actions throughout the years have barred the executive branch from spending money to execute policies that Congress does not want to fund.
Now, is that all you'd be willing to do?
So that's a normal thing for us to do.
Is that it?
And
because
we can do that.
We've had the budgetary measures are not as controversial as some of the other things that people are suggesting, such as possible impeachment of the president for what many would consider lawless actions if he goes too far. The president does have prosecutorial discretion when it comes to immigration. The Supreme Court made that clear as recently as 2012. But if he gets to the point where it looks like he's broadly ignoring laws that have been passed and signed into law by a president, then it could be an abuse of power. So he's going to have to be very careful about how far he goes. Some have suggested if he goes too far, he should be impeached. Charles Krauthammer is on the Fox News channel saying yesterday to Republicans, if he does that, don't take the bait. Would you?
No, I think we've got plenty of tools, and we need to use every one of those tools. Look, the American people have pleaded with Congress and presidents for 30 years. They've asked, pleaded, and demanded, really, a lawful system of immigration that serves the national interest. President Obama is decimating law enforcement, Megan, in a host of ways. This is just one of them. He's destroying the law enforcement. The morale of our immigration officers are the lowest of any agency in the government. They sued the Secretary of Homeland Security for causing them to violate their oath and not enforce the laws of the country. It's an unbelievable circumstance. The President is arrogantly refusing to follow the will of the American people, first and foremost, and to fulfill his duty to faithfully see that the laws of the United States are executed.
Is there anything,
really
and it should be noted, that if he issues an executive action that is not to the liking of the country, he could be replaced by a Republican who would undo what he did. And an executive action doesn't have the full force of law behind it, and so it could be undone by another president. But I want to ask you this. Is there any chance that what he's demanding be done will in fact get done, which is the House and the Senate, which is now controlled by Democrats until the end of the year, and that's when he wants it. He wants it by January. Will work together to come up with a comprehensive immigration reform bill, because they did that before. It did pass the Senate. You didn't sign on, and the House said no. So what do you think now?
Well, we need to improve the laws of the United States, and we need to create a principled immigration system that serves the interests of the American people, that does not pull down wages, that does not deny Americans jobs that they'd otherwise be able to take. We absolutely need to do that. And I would say the American people are overwhelmingly in favor of that. So I would warn my Democratic colleagues, look to what happened to some of your colleagues in this past election. You need to understand the American people want something done. And if you stand in the way of it and you filibuster and block,
what are you talking about specifically? Because the Democrats were behind the last bill. It was the Republicans in the House and some in the Senate, like yourself, who said this bill isn't good enough. And that was a bill that would have provided for more security, would have provided a border fence, would have provided more money for enforcement along the border, and would have eventually provided a path for citizenship.
Well, it would double the number of workers coming into the country to take jobs. It would go on from 10 million people getting permanent legal status in America over the next 10 years to 30, and would not be an effective enforcement tool, as we demonstrated. And that's why the House said it was dead on arrival when it arrived over there. It did not do the job. The talking points they put out were good and sounded wonderful. But when you read the bill, it did not do what they promised. So we've got to write a bill that will work. Yes, we can do that, but biggest part of the problem is they won't enforce the laws that are on the books. They won't do the job now. We've got a lot of laws that simply are not being enforced, encouraging more and more people to come unlawfully, making it really putting extreme pressure on the working Americans whose wages are down and whose employment prospects are down.
Senator Jeff Sessions, thank you for being here, sir. All the best to you.